What you're experiencing right now is the great divide between the poor and the rich. And this gap keeps getting bigger and bigger. But this event is so subtle that you probably don't even realize it's going on around you. The good news is that you still have time to choose which side of the gap you're going to be on. Essentially, there's 3 steps required in order to jump this gap to land on the other side in financial security. In today's video, I'm going to be focusing on the first step, the art of accumulating wealth by patching the money leaks in your wallet. You see, every week, you're spending at least 40 gruesome hours working to make ends meet. At the same time, you have holes in your pockets that are leaking out the money as fast as the money's coming in. Let's dive into 5 of these leaks that nobody else is talking about. And on this list, I'm really excited about the 5th one. So anyways, without further ado, let's get into it. So first of all, HVAC repairs can really take a hit on your pocketbook. Your HVAC unit is responsible for the heating and cooling in your home. The cooling part of your HVAC works by refrigeration, and when the blower sends air through the cold fins and into your home, it demands more air through the vent. In each vent, you have a filter paper that helps clean the air to prevent dust from gathering on the fins and blower, which can then insulate the fins and prevent the air from being cooled as it returns to your home. It's critical to have this filter paper on the vent to prevent all of the dust and contaminants to come into your HVAC unit that causes jamming in the moving parts, and then you have to call an HVAC team to come out and repair it. You need to replace these filters every 3 to 6 months because it plugs up too much. It causes the blower to work harder and harder just to get the air moving, and this can ultimately cause the blower to overheat and burn up. If the dusty filter fails because of the excess pull from the blower, it'll pull dust and contaminants into the HVAC unit, so when you change these filters out often, this preventative maintenance can actually save you anywhere between $100 and $1,000 per year, depending on how severe the mishap can be. Our second item that's on the list is very scary because it can cause so much damage, but at the same time, it's so subtle that you won't even know it's happening, and that is external water damage from the ground. You see, gutters serve an important purpose, especially in climates where rain and snow are constant. When it rains, the water works its way down the roof and falls onto the ground where it soaks into the soil and creates hydrostatic pressure on your foundation, which will cause it to crack and then form a leak. If you have a basement, the water can actually cause the wall to bow inward. Furthermore, it can erode the soil that supports the foundation, and this can actually cause the entire house to sink. So you might be asking, how much money does this cost? So according to Forbes, this can actually cost up to $13,000. And my guess is you can't afford this. But what you're more likely to afford is a gutter install of your entire home. And even if you don't install on your entire home, you can at least install gutters on the more troublesome parts of your home, where it collects the most rain. That's probably not going to cost you over $500. Now that's a lot better than $13,000. Now once you install the gutters, it's important to include a mesh on top of the downspouts so that you don't get a lot of debris down there, which plugs it up and renders the whole gutter useless. Now cleaning gutters is child's play compared to a very complex and costly foundation repair. It just involves you getting up high and evaluating your gutters and then cleaning it out like this. You can use a pressure washer to get a lot of the stubborn debris out of the downspouts. Now for the third item on our list, this can actually become more acute for you because it'll cause more damage in a shorter amount of time, and that is internal water damage. You see, there's something overlooked in our homes all the time, and that is the toilet. The toilet is so basic in its design, and it's stinky and nobody really wants to touch it, so we just kind of leave it alone. But what you don't think about is that while you're going about your day-to-day business, there's a small valve on that toilet and on your sinks that's holding back about 20 to 30 pounds of water pressure. And if that thing leaks, or especially if it blows, you're going to have water all over the inside of your home. In worst case scenario, you might be on vacation, you won't even know what's happening. So if that does happen, it's going to cost you about $3 to $4 per square foot of damage. So in a bathroom, that could cost a few $100s, but in a living room, that can get up as high as $900. If you have carpet, that can range between $4 to $11 per square foot, and that can cost a few $1,000s. And this doesn't even incorporate the drywall that can be damaged, and that costs between $1 and $3 per square foot. So imagine if you have to replace all of that, re-mud and repaint. I personally know a family that had water damage going on in their home for over a month, and they had no idea what was happening. And when they finally found out, they had to renovate the entire kitchen and living room, costing them thousands upon thousands of dollars. and they had to get additional jobs just to cover the costs. Now, to fix this, I would recommend to go and inspect those valves and parts on your toilets and sinks very often. But the problem is that even after a recent install, you could still have a leak. The best way to prevent water damage is to catch it quickly by buying a water leak detector. Now, there's simpler ones that just set off an alarm once it detects a leak, and then there's also ones that are more advanced that send alerts to your phone, and it's relatively cheap to buy with really good reviews. Now, the fourth on this list is water damage from the sky. You see, shingles are hydrophobic, and this means that the water drips down over the shingles without soaking into the wood frame of the home and leaking into the home itself. But all it takes is one leaky shingle, and that can cost you thousands of dollars of damage. So instead of spending a cold, stormy winter day trying to repair the damage caused by the leaky roof, you should choose a nice warm summer day to get up on the roof and take a look at the shingles to make sure that everything looks up to par. Look for things like this that show wear and tear on the shingles, and look for areas where water might be potentially getting under the shingles. Patch jobs are definitely a lot cheaper than repairing water damage, costing only $100 or so for a bundle of shingles versus thousands of dollars for a water damage repair job. Now, eventually your roof becomes irreparable and you need to replace it. Professionals recommend re-roofing every 20 to 30 years depending on what kind of shingles you have. Now, the last item on this list is what I'm really excited about, and that is the inefficiency of heating and cooling in your home and how to address it. So if you're looking for the fastest, easiest way to save money, that is, stay away from small electrical heaters during the winter. Instead, you should rely more on your central heat. You see, a 1,000-watt small space heater operating for about 12 hours a day will add about $40 to your monthly bill. So during the winter, this adds roughly about $120 to $160 per season. Now that's just for one heater. If you have multiple heaters, especially one per room, that can raise your bill to over $100 per month. So you definitely want to use your central heat. And in addition to that, you want to close doors to rooms that you don't use. And when you're gone, turn your heat down. Now, the best way to save money by reducing your energy usage will take a little bit of work, but it's definitely got a good return on investment. And that is, you want to heavily insulate your attic. And while this can cost anywhere between $1,600 and $3,800, it's only a one-time cost, and it'll have a really good ROI for the next couple of years. Simply put, it can slice your bills in half. And that goes for heating and cooling. Now, if you have a crawl space under your floor, I would recommend insulating that too by simply taking insulation and stapling it to the bottom of your floor. Now, keep in mind there's other ways that you can keep your home insulated, like closing the blinds and putting films over the windows and making sure that your windows are insulated. Now, I want to focus on the HVAC unit, which incorporates AC, and compare that to evaporative cooling. Which one is cheaper and why? As previously mentioned, the AC unit uses refrigeration, and in so doing, it needs energy to power a compressor, which pumps the refrigerant throughout the system and condenses it to a hot liquid. Then more energy is needed to power a fan, which then blows ambient air over the coils to release the heat to the outdoors. After the refrigerant flows through the thermal expansion valve, it turns into a cold gas using the relationship between volume and temperature. That is, as the substance expands, it cools down. The refrigerant then continues through the evaporator coil, where more energy is used to power the blower that sends the air from the home over those cold coils to cool off the air before it returns back to the room. So as you can see, there's three main elements that consume energy, and don't get me wrong, it's very effective in humid conditions. But what if it's not humid? Then we can take a look at the evaporative cooler. This works by circulating water through media on the outside of the swamp cooler using a small pump in the bottom of the tray. As the water trickles down, energy is used to generate a blower that pulls air across the wet media pads and promotes evaporation. To understand this better, here's a chart that shows how much energy is required in BTUs to heat water up from 32 degrees to boiling. And then this is how much energy is required to evaporate that boiling water into a gas. You'll notice that the energy required for evaporation is greater than 5 times the energy required to heat the water up from freezing to boiling. That's insane, right? Well, this brings me back to the evaporative cooler. Blowing air across the water promotes evaporation, but in order for the water to evaporate, it has to pull the high amount of required energy from its surroundings. And when it does this, it cools the air and water around it. And this can cause a drop between 15 and 40 degrees Fahrenheit in temperature. So the components needing energy in the swamp cooler is the blower and the small pump. And that is more efficient than powering up an AC unit, which requires power to the blower, the fan, and the high energy consuming compressor. So what this means is that the swamp cooler uses 15 to 35% of the energy that an AC unit uses. Furthermore, the AC unit costs about twice as much to install than the swamp cooler. Now, when it's humid, it's harder to get water to evaporate in an already saturated atmosphere. So the effectiveness of the swamp cooler is hindered when it's in humid conditions. So the rule of thumb is that if you live in a climate that's 40% or less in humidity, then you should use the swamp cooler. So that brings me to the conclusion. If you pay heed to this video, it'll get you closer to achieving your first step in jumping that ever-widening gap between the poor and the rich. Now, if you're out of debt already and you have savings in a savings account just sitting there, and you're wondering what the second step is in jumping that gap, well then I recommend watching this video right here to get started. So thank you so much guys for watching, and I will see you guys next time.